Hello and welcome back to another Before You Buy, and today I want to talk about buying a NAS for photography. It's probably one of the most popular reasons that a number of people move away from cloud services, given that more modern recent mobile phones are taking some bloody big photos these days, and it's only getting bigger. So the amount of space being used up for online cloud storage and the amount of security and people's worries about their data being somewhere a little bit more public can be disconcerting. And a number of you will make the switch onto a network storage device from any one of a million brands behind me. And today I want to talk about 5 of the main concerns I think people should have and things they should bear in mind before buying a NAS for photography. Now, by photography, it's a pretty broad term there. Let's be honest, photography goes into many forms. Maybe you're someone working in post, working tirelessly to get one photo, très bon, perfect. Or you're someone that's just got decades of photos knocking around on different USB sticks on different phones, and you just want them all in one centralized location. We're going to bundle all of that into the word photography today. Although some of this is going to be more appealing to one or the other, it's worth bearing that in mind. So the first thing that you need to bear in mind when it comes to having a NAS of any kind for storing lots of photos long term is indexing. This is a word that's been, well, it used to be thrown around all the time, and now is because it's done semi-autonomously a lot of the time by NASs. No one really talks about it, but it's still a huge factor in a NAS that's going to be primarily used for photography. Indexing is when you chuck a load of files, a load of photo files in album form and more onto the NAS, and then with indexing, it has to go through them all. Now, the extent to which it indexes, the files that it indexes and what it does with that information will become clearer throughout the video, and the extent to which different brands do it also does differ. But the importance of indexing is so that your system knows where all the photos are, and then therefore using different photo apps, they'll be displayed correctly. Also, if you're searching for photos in a number of ways, the system needs to know that these directories exist and what's in them. And finally, something called thumbnail generation. Now, thumbnails, when you do have your system, you're looking at it there, you're looking at all your photos on your PC, you're looking at little mini images there, and then when you double click it, boom, you get the big old image. The little one is called the thumbnail, and I know how condescending that sounds, and I know 95% of you heard that and went, we know that, Rob, move on. I get it. But thumbnail generation on a NAS is slightly different, because remember, when you are accessing the photos on a NAS, chances are you are accessing them remotely, maybe on the local area network, which is fine, but you might be accessing them via the internet. That thumbnail that's generated by the NAS also has to be visible on your phone. You've got to be able to browse the photos on your NAS and not just see a lot of pictures of a big white box that says photo on it. The thumbnail generation of a NAS is a big part of that indexing. It has to create that and keep a record of all the thumbnails, and when you browse them on client devices, all too often that thumbnail, there is a lesser temp file living on your phone that will be flushed out over time as they're recycled and got rid of. But thumbnail generation is a big part of photos on a NAS, and without it, browsing photos on a NAS is clunky as hell. So bear in mind, if you are uploading photos to a NAS, the bigger your collection, the more time is going to be spent indexing, the more time is going to be spent with thumbnail generation and linking all the information of all the files in the background. But this can be negated in a number of ways. So for example, you can set it up that the indexing is done at a certain time of day. You can have it so the system checks and re-indexes in the background, maybe at 2 a.m. when everyone's asleep. Maybe it's being done, intermittently every hour if you're uploading them regularly. Or it can only be done when you choose to do it. You can even pause indexing as well, because it will eat away at your system resources. And again, the bigger the collection, the more resources will be consumed during the indexing of your photo. So do provision that into it. Different brands do it a different way. When you upload photos onto a Synology NAS, for example, and you don't have to even tell the NAS that they are photos, you just have to upload them, and then you'll see at the top right of the corner, it will know it's uploading the files, and then a new pop-up will appear to say that it's indexing these files, and therefore it knows about photos, video, file types, PDF, etc, etc. QNAP, on the other hand, the way they handle it is when you upload the files, it's quite similar to that of Synology, but they have a whole dedicated tool called Multimedia Console, and with that one, it's far more task specialized, app specialized, and ultimately does handle thumbnail generation and indexing intelligently, a great deal better. But again, it does require a little bit more work on day one, which is always the case whenever we compare Synology and QNAP. Now, the second thing that's a big part of more modern network attached storage over the last couple of years is AI recognition. It's something that Google kind of really introduced into their devices. And again, if you don't already know about this, if you do have a collection of photos on your phone and you're using the latest iPhone or you're using the latest Google phone or something, go into the photo app and there's a search bar at the top and just type in the word cat or dog or hot dog or something. Chuck in those words, and what you'll notice is it will generate results for you without you even naming the files. You might have a photo of a cat on your album that you didn't call cat.png, but it found it. And that is thanks to AI recognition. It is that your photos are in line with the indexing that we just talked about, goes through and identifies the context using an AI algorithm. It will identify people, it'll identify things, it will identify animals, it'll identify food, but different kinds of food, different cuisine. Also, some of that recognition goes into geolocational data that we'll talk about later on. But ultimately, AI recognition is something that used to be a few years ago, only available on cloud platforms because it needed such powerful computers to do it. So you can only get it with third-party cloud, and now it's something that's available on Synology, thanks to Synology Moment and soon Synology Photos, and at the same time it's something that's available with QNAP, with QMaggie. It goes through your photos and then gives you intelligent albums where you can name people. It'll go, this person appears in 4,000 photos, what's their name? You give them a name, Bertie. I don't know, who's Bertie? You give that person a name, and then that person then is all of their photos are in one place, and you can search for Bertie and it'll find photos of Bertie. The more people you add, you can go, I want photos of Bertie, Johnny and Sarah, and any photo that has those three people, boom, it will give you those photos. AI recognition allows you to, for example, upload decades of photos onto a NAS, and then after it's indexed it, after it's analysed it with AI, it then allows you to search them in an intelligent way. You can look for different kinds of drink, different kinds of food, different kinds of location, different kinds of animal. It is a hugely extensive range supported by the AI there on them, and you don't need to be connected to the internet to use it, which is a big part of this. Lots of people want to move away from the cloud, and when they use a NAS with its inbuilt AI recognition software, without it being connected to the internet, the result is they can have all the benefits of AI recognition in photo collections, but at the same time not have to worry that anyone can access their data. Why am I telling you this? Because a lot of the time AI recognition, and this goes for cloud as well, it's not perfect. And if you do upload decades of photos and you are buying a NAS specifically to take advantage of this apparent offline AI recognition, bear in mind that if you upload a decade of photos, there's a lot of people in there. Not just the people you know, but people you don't. And when you try to upload all of these photos, because you can't tell the AI algorithm how aggressive to be, if you have, for example, a photo of when you're at a gig and there's probably 50, 100, 200 people in shot, if it's a high-res photo, the system will go, oh, we found 200 people. Who are these two? And then suddenly you have got thousands of people to sort through. Luckily, it does sort by the number of times they appear, so you get to the bottom. But dismissing people is tougher, and AI recognition is by no means perfect yet. So if you are going to buy a NAS for AI recognition, bear in mind that it's not a magic wand that will make everything easier and go away. We're not there yet. Next, I want to talk about the importance of metadata. And again, normally when I talk about metadata, I'm talking about Plex and video stuff. But metadata in photos, and just generally, if you're going to buy a NAS for photography, is actually a greater deal than I have talked about on the channel. I don't think I give it anywhere near the kind of acknowledgement that it deserves. Because once you have photos on a NAS, you have to make sure the metadata is attached. And I'll get onto the idea of separation later on. But the reason for photos and the importance of having the metadata within them is the metadata will tell you lots of things. It will tell the NAS what was the device that took the photo, what was the aperture of the camera, the ISO, what is the quality, what was the name of the device, where was the photo taken, when was the photo taken. Geolocational data linked to GPS tracking on mobile phones allow you to create a map of the world with all of your photos showing where you took them in a period of time. It also allows you to filter and search through photos by time, create albums based on that information. On top of that, it allows the system to present the photos to you in the best possible way. It helps with searches. It helps with recognition. It helps with the system creating a far more bespoke photo environment. And if you're a professional photographer who wants to use the NAS not only for their own private shared collections, but the ability to distribute and share the collections for, as a career, a job path, if you're a wedding photographer or something, or you just want to share them with just certain people within a certain frame, like only photos between this period and this period that don't have this person, that do have that. Metadata is where it is at, and in the majority of cases, the photos you upload to the NAS will have the metadata attached, but not always. Sometimes the metadata is removed or stripped, or you are using a camera where the metadata is separate to the file. The camera itself will be able to see the photo and it will be able to show you the metadata. But once you break it down into the folder structure of the SD card you're using or something, what you have is a photo and then another metadata file that's the same name, but it's got all of the metadata. So if you upload these files to the NAS will see the photo. It has no understanding of this metadata file. So before you buy a NAS for your photos, if you are going to be using and browsing through them and referencing them in these intelligent ways and searching them in these very specific ways, make sure you've merged all that metadata together. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a sec, but also double check how your photos are distributed. See if they contain the metadata. If the metadata is somewhere else, make sure you locate it before you upload to the NAS. Otherwise, it's going to be 10 times harder to put them all together later. Now, the reason metadata is important in this merging is it brings us into our fourth point, which is those of you that have moved away from Google Photos, that have moved away from Apple and iCloud and stuff like that have moved your photo collections away from these cloud services, either because it's becoming very expensive and they're removing free areas of space, something Google we talked about earlier on in the year, or you're slightly worried about how your photos are being used, and you're slightly worried about any T&C that's basically saying we use it so we can improve our AI engines, and you're not comfortable with that, or you're thinking about hacks and stuff like that. A lot of people move away from these cloud services and buy a NAS for a one-off payment, and then they feel like the photos are in one place and it's theirs and it's controllable. Well, the majority of these online platforms, if you try to remove the photos, they've stripped the metadata. And I'm going to focus primarily on Google here because it's something we've talked about in a few videos at the start of the year. But if you try to access your photos and download your photos from Google, either manually or using a service like Google Takeout, which is this online port which has all of the information you've given to Google, and you can just go, I want that, and drag it back and then pull your photos, bear in mind that they've stripped the metadata. You've uploaded a photo to them from your phone that had the metadata inside, and when you download it, it spits out two files. The photo and something called a JSON file, .json. Now there are apps out there, I'm looking at one there we were talking about before, it's called Metadata Fixer, it's the one we used for an article on NAS Compares a while ago, and that will merge them together quite well. It will merge them and then you upload them to the NAS. Don't try to do it afterwards, no point. Get them merged before you upload them. It's exhausting, it's a bit time consuming, but it means that the NAS can take advantage of all the metadata in the background and present them into the best possible way. Another thing to bear in mind, and an error, it has to be said, that was in my previous videos about moving your photos away from Google Photos to a NAS. About a year and a half ago, it was possible to move photos from Google Photos via Google Drive, because you could actually get into your photo collection via Google Drive and automatically sync them onto the NAS. It's not possible to do that anymore. It's not been possible for a while. And the result is that the only way to get the photos from Google Photos, which is now parallel to Google Drive, not together or at least one accessing the other, you have to go to Google Takeout and strip those files manually, which again means you pull them from Google Photos via Google Takeout, and then you have to use one of these merging tools like Metadata Fixer and reconnect all the metadata. It's boring, it's annoying, but it's the only way to do it. The other thing to bear in mind, if you are looking at your collections of photos over time, if you bought a Google phone in the last couple of years, or you've been using an iPhone for the last 2 or 3 gens, live photos or GIF transitions, This idea that you take a photo and it saves like a second to 3 seconds of recorded video footage that's located in the photo file, and you can extract it into a GIF or just have it as live photos. Synology is the only brand where their AI assisted photo recognition tool, Synology Moments, and in turn coming soon Synology Photos, actually recognizes those and plays them within the browser window. So if you do have a lot of Apple iPhotos, live photos, or whatever they're called, live view, or you're using a lot of the Google Photos that are converted into GIFs, Synology is the brand that will be able to handle those files in a native visual way via the graphical user interface of DSM. QNAP only displays them as still photos. It can recognize the information from the metadata, it recognizes it's there, but it can't display it, which is the real shame there. The final point for those of you out there who are going to use a NAS for photography, and this leans a little bit more back to the industry, the sort of wedding photographers and people that are buying a NAS to create their own streaming and sharing service to run a business from. Photo editing on a NAS, unfortunately, is still pretty caveman compared to everything else we've discussed. If you are, for example, running a NAS with smaller photos, and maybe you're a home user, and again, you've uploaded all those photos, and you want to edit them, you want to change the contrast, you want to play with it, add a few effects, kind of, we're not going to go as far as Photoshop and Premiere and stuff like that, but certainly there are lots of layers in between sodding Microsoft Paint and the likes of those high-end softwares. None of the NAS brands have a particularly sophisticated photo editor. There's cropping, there's rotation, a little bit of brightness, a few filters, but really nothing to write home about. And if you are buying a NAS, bear in mind that although you can connect third-party photo editing software to a NAS, none of the NAS brands have any kind of meaningful, even, I would argue, premium or featured photo editing tools available. Synology has a few more in filters and a few more in handling, but nothing really that impressive. And QNAP has less on that score, but they have support of Google Cardboard, they have support of VR3 and 360, and different kind of modes of displaying, but nothing really on an editorial stance and editing those photos. And if you are someone that wants to actively edit big photos, and going back to the top of the video, the fact that some of the photos we take on our more modern phones are like 20, 30 meg on their own, megabytes for a photo. These photos, if you're on a 1 gigabit Ethernet connection, once you hit 20, 30 meg, it's not going to be good enough. 20, 30 meg photos, although the connection to the NAS is 100 megabytes, when you're editing a file, the amount of data going back and forth and holding it on your system, after 20, 30 megabytes in size on a photo, editing a photo raw, and raw is even bigger, over 1 gigabit Ethernet is just not going to cut it. So if you are going to edit photos on a NAS, look at a NAS that is at least 2.5 GBE, 5 GBE, or 10 GBE. And of course 10 GB is a bit overkill for photo editing there, but nonetheless. Do make sure it has that, because if you try to edit on 1 GBE, or even with link aggregation or load balancing, it's not really going to cut it, and it's going to make your software lag. You're going to get frustrated. You won't be able to take advantage of things like non-linear editing, which keep shadow files. And ultimately, if you are looking to edit the photos on a NAS, you probably want to stick to using your third-party software, sure, but also go with a NAS with a better bandwidth there. If it's upgradable, great. Otherwise, get one by default, 2.5, 5, or 10G. Thank you so much for watching. Those are my big recommendations for buying a NAS for photography. I hope you enjoyed this. Before you buy, if you have, chuck me a like. If you want to learn more about getting the right NAS solution for yourself right the first time, subscribe to the channel. I talk about NAS every day, and I do cover this subject in pretty much every detail you can imagine. If you're looking for advice and some help on buying the first NAS for your home or business needs, or upgrading an existing photo solution, go into the description and find the link to NAS Compare's free advice. It is genuinely a free advice section. It's manned by me and another chap, Eddie the web guy. We will help you. Just the two of us. It's not a sales platform. We don't sell things. It is just to help people choose the right data storage solution first time. And if you want to donate to it, yum yum, but you don't have to. Use that section. It might take us an extra day or so to answer your email, because there's only the two of us, but we will answer your inquiry. Thank you so much for watching. We shall see you next time.